loud. All right. So our event today will be recorded and we'll be posting this after the event. So now I'd like to introduce you to Ryan Jenkins for those of you who didn't attend our first session. Ryan is actually joining us all the way from Germany, so it's nighttime for him. So thank you for joining us today. He's a Makerspace educator and an author of a new book that was released this past October, The Tinkering Workshop, Explore, Invent, and Build with Everyday Materials. So I'll go ahead and kick it off to you, Ryan. Let me stop my share.
Great. Thanks, Karen, and thanks for everyone joining us live today and also who are here watching the recording. My name is Ryan Jenkins. I'm originally from Los Angeles area. I spent about 15 years living in the Bay Area, California, working at the Exploratorium Science Center in San Francisco. And then for the last 6 or 7 years, running an independent studio that's designing resources for exploring art, science, and technology through making and tinkering, working with schools, libraries, museums, and all kinds of other interesting places. And I'm super happy to have the chance to be here with all of you and share a little bit about my new book, The Tinkering Workshop, but especially in this second session, have the chance to chat and to think together a little bit about what tinkering might look like in the library setting. So if you can, feel free to have your camera on and your audio on. Really happy if we can chat and interact. And if it works better for you, you can also interact with the text chat, and we will keep an eye on that as well. So just to give a quick outline for what we'll be doing today. I wanted to spend the first few minutes talking together about a reflection that we started last week, and we'll finish up in the second half of the workshop. We'll spend about 15 minutes exploring one of the projects from the book. We can either work with this for the first time, and then if you were here last week, I have some ways that you can possibly go deeper with this activity. We'll spend about 15 minutes sharing some tips or suggestions for tinkering in the library, and then we'll finish off with second half of this reflection, thinking about what are the next steps for each of us in terms of bringing this approach into our practice. And yeah, just for all of us to be on the same page, just very quickly, this is the book that we've been referencing. It's a book of explorations, materials highlights, prompts, featured artists, and a lot of possible entry points to explore STEAM topics using everyday materials. We talked quite a bit in the last session about the behind the scenes process and how through the text and the photos in the book, we tried to convey an attitude of playfulness, of open-endedness, so that there isn't just one right way to do each one of these activities. And also that the most important part of these projects is not the outcome, but also is more the process that you go through and all the questions and ideas and false starts and things that don't quite work out according to plan. That's really where the learning happens in these activities. It's not about following the steps number one, two, three, and everyone getting to the same point, but that hopefully each person will come to the pages of the book, which looks something like this, and will make their own version that will probably be new and surprising and something that I had never imagined before. Um, and yeah, I think that this book is written for kids and families to be able to do these projects at home, in the garage, in the backyard, around the kitchen table. But I'm also hoping that these explorations provide starting points, provide inspirations, can be borrowed, adapted, or remixed across educational settings, and especially in libraries, because I think this is a really rich area for exploring tinkering projects. And I'm just checking. Yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to jump in.
We've had some comments about how beautiful your book is.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and mentioned, yeah, last week we had Hesh Hip, who is a photographer who took a lot of these images, as well as ones that were from previous workshops or that I uh, got permission to use from other artists or tinkerers around the world. But yeah, I think that it is important, this aesthetic quality, that it is engaging, that it brings people in, and that hopefully it allows people to come up with their own ideas. And as you can see on the side here, the kind of instructions are a few things to get going, but then the majority of the pages are tips, questions, suggestions, encouragements for the things that don't go according to plan, what might be more of a facilitation approach. So maybe I just stop sharing real quickly to describe what we started last week and what we'll continue doing this week. So to think a bit together about how to adapt these tinkering explorations and ideas into a library setting, I borrowed and adapted a tool that was created by the Harvard Graduate School of Education Project Zero group. They have a bunch of these, what they call thinking routines, which are ways of organizing the conversation. And today, and the last session, we're using this one that's called compass points. And you all can do this too around our call today, and also if you're watching later on. But basically, you draw a circle, and then you have an X through it. And so then you have these four parts of the compass that's like north, east, south, and west. I'm doing this reversed mirrored show. But last week we talked about the first two sessions, the east and the west part. So I collected our notes, and I will share that with all of you. So for the E, we each wrote down something that excites us about tinkering in libraries. So people wrote about discovering possibilities, having free choice, hands-on learning, collaboration, playful, kind of identified a lot of these open-ended qualities of the experience. And we also wrote about the W part, which was what worries us? What worries do we have about tinkering in libraries? So I think I like this one because it can contain both the like very practical side, like uh, having enough supplies for the amount of kids that come to the table. So very like logistical, but then also thinking more about the either like the pedagogy or the expectations. So how to support people if they shut down when they don't have a clear idea of what they should be doing or making in the space. So I just wanted to open it up if people on this call had any comments or questions, things to add about either the things that are exciting about tinkering in libraries or things that are potentially worries you all have about tinkering in your settings. If you
Um,
saw something that
okay.
speaks to you, yeah, Karen.
Oh, yeah. What excites me about making in libraries is that it shows that making is for everyone. Like anyone can come in and make. Um, they have tools and resources available to them to be makers. Um, yeah, that's what excites
Oh,
me.
yeah, thanks. Other people saw something that either they kind of agree with or something that they feel that they didn't see on this collection of phrases that people wrote down.
Well, I very much fall into the like things excite me about tinkering in libraries, but I'll speak from the lens of a school library. So one
Mhm.
of the worries I think people have is if like what's the curricular connection?
Mm.
So does it just feel like random playing from somebody who might just be walking by? I mean, we know it's deeper than that, but that's oftentimes something that I hear from
Yeah,
people is like, where does it fit into the learning?
yeah, yeah. Sometimes our team at the Exploratorium would say something like, "It looks like fun, but are they learning?" Or "It looks like fun, but where is the learning?" And yeah, I think that's a really important aspect to try to figure out, like how to explain, how to show, how to scaffold the experience, both for yourself, for the participants, and also for the, someone who kind of swoops in and swoops out and might just be looking on the surface. How do you kind of break through? So thanks, Judy. And yeah, so Shannon in the chat is saying a worry that she identifies is not having the right instructions or guidance to inspire tinkering and creating. Um, and that's great. And we'll talk a bit more about this over the course of the day. And I also just would say like a nice well, something that excites me on the other side of this is that like I am not uh, I don't have a background in science or technology or engineering. Like these aren't things that I feel like I have a very like uh, formal background in. And I think that it's not necessary to facilitate these sorts of projects. A lot of times, what you're doing is really learning alongside the participants, and I'm very I want to say envious is the right word, but I mean, I feel that the library is such a great uh, place to do these projects because there will probably be moments where uh, you need extra instruction or extra guidance or extra resource. And I think that's where, um, all of the resources that you have available for you, you can play that kind of connector. Um, yeah. And as I agree with what Ken is saying, that just trying out an activity on your own before an event gives you a lot of insight into what points are exciting, frustrating, when people need help, when people might want to be left alone. You can draw on your experience as a learner. So cool. Yeah, and then I think this worry side about if people expect things to be done a certain way, and I think like some people are more used to learning in that style. So I think again, like I think we mentioned this last week, but even the way you introduce a prompt might have a big effect on how people approach the activity. So saying today we're going to build a balancing sculpture might give people the sense that there's like a very specific outcome at the end. If today you say like we're experimenting with weights and balance, we're seeing how things can move and stick on points, like just this introducing what you're doing as playing, as trying and testing, that also can make a big difference. So cool. Thanks, everyone. And together with this group today, and anyone who's following along later, we'll do the north and the south part of the compass. So, but before we do that, I wanted to spend a little bit of time, like, who has brought some materials to work today? We were suggesting before that we are going to try one of the, maybe I'll just show this first. We're going to try together one of the projects in the book, which is about linkages. So making mechanisms out of initially cardboard and these kind of brass paper fasteners that you might find around the office. And I'll show a little bit of how we can get started doing that. But also today, since it's the second session for some of us working on these materials, I'd like to show some ideas about how we can also go deeper with these projects, or experiment ourselves a little bit with what other possibilities there are. And I just wanted to share from last week, Ken, who is our returner, was making a completely different orientation of linkages than the one that we featured in the book, although it was made out of the same basic building block, which is this kind of, well, either the X or the kind of two X's stuck together. And he just did it in different angles. Or I also wanted to show this one, which is what my colleague at the Connecticut Science Center sent to me, of a group that's experimenting with linkages and cardboard mechanisms, but instead of doing them kind of free form, they're using this pegboard surface as the base. Oops. Cool. So does anybody have some of these materials to be working with? Ken is going like this. Well, maybe I will show a few things that I have in mind. We don't have to spend so long, because you know, we can also save this and come back to it. And when you have a bit more free time, experiment with some of these parts or materials. But basically, the main parts that we're using are, like I said, different lengths of cardboard. Yeah, and that's cool. And, one of the things we say in the book, and also that we say in real life, is, yeah, it's all about testing out and trying with different materials. So if you don't have these specific brass fasteners, you know, maybe you can bend a wire, maybe you can do it a paper clip, or maybe you can build something. I think one of the ones we show in the book is using like a little tiny piece of straw and sticking that in between two pieces of the cardboard. So these are kind of the main pieces we have. For this activity, we also use masking tape, so like to kind of stick things together a bit better. And then also it's helpful to have some scissors around. And one other tool that we use and talk about in the book that I always recommend, like if you have the chance to try a new tool as part of a tinkering activity, it can work really well. This is called an awl. It's a little kind of pointy metal piece. And I just kind of taped a bunch of pieces of cardboard together. You can make more or less sophisticated versions of this pad, but basically it's just something that you can use so that when you poke a hole, you can actually have a little place to like poke into. Cool. So I'll just show, and if you have the materials and you'd like to start on your own projects or experiments, you can go ahead. I'm just going to show for this group and also for the people watching some other possibilities. I'll start again with kind of the basic building blocks. So I kind of did it halfway this time. But so like the most basic building block that we're using is this kind of what's called a 4-bar linkage, because it's just well, 4 pieces of cardboard. You can also notice with this cardboard, it's not necessary, but it's helpful if the cardboard has the lines, like these pieces of corrugation, like if those are running in the same direction, if that makes sense, as the piece, that gives it a lot more like stability in that direction. Again, it's not necessary, but it's just a little helpful tip. So yeah, you can start by making 2 little X's with the brads in the middle, and then connect them together by poking a hole. Yeah, and feel free to, I see Karen is like running around and grabbing stuff, so feel free to like raid your desk or your home office and grab some stuff. But then yeah, basically you can add these brads in the corners and kind of squeeze them down and put them together. And then you can do the same thing on the other side here. And, you know, this gives you this kind of starting point. And I think it's nice to have this a little bit. This is this kind of nice, you know, scissor, what do you call it? It's like kind of comic book boxing glove effect, especially if you start to attach a lot of these together. These can also start to be characters. You know, you can imagine like adding teeth or kind of googly eye over here and seeing what that would be. And then like what I like to do is just to start experimenting a bit. So like, for example, like what if this brad was all the way over here? You know, like what change would that do in the way that this machine works? And, you know, that's kind of the tinkering approach where, you know, we don't know what this would be, but, you know, it's going to be something different. And if it's a character or if it's a, you know, something that does something that, you know, rings a bell or, you know, knocks a domino off the table, you know, this will have a different effect and work differently depending on.
Ryan,
And yeah,
sorry to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
What length fasteners are you using?
Well, I have just a really random collection that I grabbed from my shop. But I think for cardboard, yeah, I would say um, maybe around an inch is probably best. Like if you like depending on yeah, I think these are actually even a bit smaller. Like I think like the ones that I'm using, like maybe they're like 3/4 of an inch or possibly an inch. I'm also in Germany, so they might be like metric system uh, fasteners. But yeah, I would say around like 3/4 of an inch to an inch is pretty good for cardboard. But it's nice to have a variety around because if you want to add different materials together, like some cardboard is really thick, like there's this kind of um, like 3 layered cardboard. And then there's also maybe some person wants to add like just a sheet of paper onto the linkage. So I might suggest to have a 2 or 3 different sizes that you can build in. And so yeah, I'm just going to show a couple other ideas that I'm curious to explore more, things that we also talk a little bit about in the book. But something that I'm curious to explore more is also changing out materials. So what happens if instead of cardboard, you're using uh, straws? Uh, I've also tried this kind of fluted plastic. Um, it's kind of like a cardboard that's yeah, it's like a plastic cardboard basically, that could be interesting. And then I also think there are lots of toys or kind of construction sets that have these qualities. So, using Legos that have this kind of uh, already pattern of holes in them. This also could be interesting to experiment with. And then the other one that I'm not sure if I'm actually going to get time to do today, but one of the other things we feature in the book is this idea of like making a rolling uh, machine with linkages. So, well, this is a kind of a prototype, but what I would like to try is to attach one of these bars to the wheel and one of these bars to the body of the part and see if we can get kind of a motion so that this comes around as the wheel goes. So maybe we'll just spend uh, 4 more minutes working together. I see Ken's hands are busy, which is good. And Karen is working. I don't know if other people have the materials. Feel free also to ask questions during this time, but I'm just going to see if this will work. The project that we show for this in the book is inspired by an artist from Israel called Noga El Hasid. And she does a lot of kind of linkage experiments that are under a studio called Moving Toys Workshop. Okay, this is kind of working. And so that's also someone that I would recommend checking out. I can write the name in the chat or add it in the show notes at the end. Yes, this one's a bit too short. Any questions that people have, or does anyone want to share what they are trying or experimenting with? And could you mention also either what you're doing now or say a little bit more about what you were trying last week?
Yeah, I saw an image from the book last week, and I thought I wanted to attempt to recreate it. It was sort of like a fish, and I assumed that the mouth would move, but then I kind of got sidetracked and made this sideways movement instead.
Okay.
Which I guess is also it's fun, but I didn't really find out whether the fish worked.
Well, that's okay. There's still time. I really liked this project that you made last week that I was showing, because like it really shows how like you can start with yeah, okay, you could start with like something very simple, and just by repeating it you're sort of making a
Yeah.
What's the word, like you're making a building set, or you're making kind of a vocabulary there, and yeah, like I can start to imagine, like just by having 4 of those X's together, what it would be like, and then like combining 2 of those things together, and like it's almost like this kind of fractal or something like that. It's a bit hard with a camera to show, but I'm finding with this I need to have a better kind of grip. So like basically, like while this rolls, now I have something that's kind of moving. I need to scoot this back. Like while this rolls on the ground, I have something that's moving, but as I'm doing that, I'm finding that actually rolling it is a little bit like I'm not getting enough kind of weight, I think, on the machine. So like unless I really press down on it, it's not necessarily rolling. It's just what's the word? Stopping. Yeah. Oh, maybe yeah, on the carpet. Maybe I have something like that. Thanks. Yeah, let's see. I'll go do that. And then there's any other, Karen, are you building something?
Yes, I'm trying to. I didn't have fasteners, so I have some
Yeah.
paper clips though that kind of worked. It does give the motion for this. So now I'm trying to think of what I can attach to it to give it some life, I guess.
Yay. Hey, cool. Shannon, that's a great idea. So Shannon wrote in the chat, what if you roll it instead of on the wood surface on a soft cloth surface? And now I'm using this laptop case and it works great. So that's kind of also a really interesting part about these activities, is how like they can lead into other explorations. And so, I mean, I could imagine now like a whole part of making linkage cars could be like building tracks that especially make them work better or not. So I think each of the projects in the book have the ability to become well, they have yeah, awesome. And thanks, Patty. That's like I feel like I'm kind of planting these uh uh comments, because it's really exactly like what I was going to say, was that I think a really important part about these projects is that they can lead to uh going deeper, becoming complex, and that can either be from a like scientific or technical side. So I think this exploration of friction, what sort of materials makes this mechanism work better, both on the road surface and also on the physical construction. It's a really great scientific exploration. And then what Patty wrote, like the arm looks like someone rowing a boat. And like this just brings up to me that this could be like an amazing like artistic wormhole to go into. Is like, okay, how do I create a realistic character or a story about who is driving this machine, what kind of machine it is, where it's going? I mean, I'm just looking at Ken, who is like the master at this kind of world building around these activities. But I mean, I think that there's so much kind of art elements as well. And yeah, I think I'd like to move on, and but I feel like we, hopefully people who are doing the project on their own time, watching the recording, or also all of us will continue working on these machines. And yeah, Shannon's question was, what was the assignment? And really, it was just similar to what we did today, to just start out by building this uh, 4-bar linkage, and then start uh, adding things, changing things, experimenting with different parts there, and seeing where that exploration takes you. I'll show the spread of the book just as kind of a last image, so that people can kind of see what this looks like in the book, where we start with this same linkage that we were building today, and then kind of show how that could be integrated or added into a larger structure. And then this is a story, a linkage story with a fish and a fishing pole, and then that kind of leads into um, all the other types of creations you can do, from drawing machines to motorized linkages, changing materials, to these wheeled linkages that I was experimenting with today. Cool. Well, we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to do 2 more things. So maybe I'll just say kind of quickly a few ideas for how to get started tinkering in libraries. Each one of these, I think we can really dive into, and maybe we'll have a chance to do a little bit more in the reflection. But these are just some thoughts. The first one is to borrow, adapt, and remix from other makers, other tinkerers, other educators. I think it's really important that these projects don't start from scratch. They don't start from kind of imagining something that's never been done before. I think a lot of times it's finding a book, finding a website, a YouTube video, a workshop that you saw at a museum or a school, and see how you can start adapting that into your setting. Oftentimes, these projects might start with kind of building off of a theme or a material. In the book, we are organized around materials, so things like clothespins, motors, string, plastic, bubble wrap, that these are a material exploration that could lead to a tinkering project. And then I think in the same way, thinking about, I remember in events we had at the Exploratorium where the themes were toys and trash and time, and tools, for one year. And, just that each one of these T letter topics that happen to be our overarching theme for that year can open up a lot of new ideas and possibilities for activities and prompts. I would recommend to search out local artists and tinkerers to collaborate with. This is something that I'm also doing here in living in a new city in Freiburg, Germany. Trying to find people who are sculptors or knitters or screen printers, and invite them to share what their process is, what tools they use, and see if you can work together to try to find ways to make playful entry points to these projects. And maybe if we have some time at the end for the reflection, I'd love to hear a bit from also from Ken about what his experience is being an artist working with a library. Another tip or an idea is to think about adding tinkering or making projects as just a subtle shift or change in your facilitation practice. So to do tinkering in the library doesn't mean kind of changing everything or getting rid of the way that you normally approach projects, but it might just be figuring out how to make things a bit more, change something that makes the project more playful, or do a small tweak that makes things more open-ended. I completely agree with the idea to try activities yourself or with a few colleagues before working with library visitors. We chatted about this earlier, but I think this is the best way that you can anticipate and empathize and understand with what it's like to be a participant. And I think, you won't learn everything about the activity, but it gives a good basis for sharing with others. I think it's really important to always be iterating with the materials, the facilitation, and the environment. So I would suggest, if you try any of these tinkering projects in your setting, that you don't plan to just do them once, but plan to return to these projects. And each time you do it, see if there's something that you might want to change or do differently the next time, to encourage people to work together more, or to highlight a material that nobody used the first time around and you think could be really useful to the project. So I think, just to say that it's always a process, and I know every time I do a activity, there's always something new that I'm trying and researching as a practitioner. And then finally, this idea of looking for wide walls as a sign of success. I think for me, the most valuable input about how these activities are working is, are people able to make something different? Are they able to express their own ideas so that what each person around the table makes looks different from each other? It's not necessary, but I think you might be surprised by how often people create something that you, as the facilitator, as the designer, couldn't have expected, or didn't imagine that they would come up with. Cool. So this was like a super fast kind of tips or suggestions that I have. But maybe I could introduce the topics for the compass points, so that maybe we all can do them later on our own when we have a bit more time. But maybe, since we have a group of people here, we could just have a bit of a discussion about these last 2 compass points. And I think it's related to everything we've been talking about today. So the the north side, the end of the compass, you write down what you need to know. Like, what do you need to know more to do these tinkering projects in your setting? This could be practical, philosophical, technical. So what are things you need to know more? And then the S, or the south part of the compass, is what is a suggestion that you would give either to yourself or to a colleague trying one of these tinkering projects out with kids and adults who are coming to the library. So what's some things you need to know, and what's one suggestion that you would give to yourself or colleagues trying this with kids and adults who come to your spaces? So I think we don't have enough time to write and talk. So maybe if it's okay for the group here, we could just open up the floor for either comments or questions based on those two prompts. And do you have suggestions for librarians approaching tinkerers or artists that they might like to work with?
Yeah, I think if you can find someone who does something that you can't do, or in ways you don't do them, that's really interesting. I mean, that's maybe a bit obvious, but I mean, I work with a lot of libraries, and they're great places. I really, really love them. And the people who work there have a skill set that is totally different to mine. And it's really great to meet that. And we can sort of complement each other or complete each other in these collaborations. And I think, I know artists are often sort of seen as the wacky types who come in, but we just tend to have a different way to see the world and other opportunities and so on. We did a marble run in one library, and with cardboard. And I started I also cut this out because I wanted to keep it because it has some nice lettering. And I started just cutting out the letters from the cardboard boxes and make signs for these marble runs. They didn't have any function, but they sort of made this Kowloon walled city-like mad structure where marbles just traveled around. And it wasn't really to add a story, it was just sort of an impulse, but then it grows into a story in collaboration with whoever builds on it.
Thanks. No, it's really helpful. And I think I think that's, I mean, I think whoever you can work with who will brings, and I think it will always be like this, but I think especially artists and makers and tinkerers are used to looking at things in a different way. So to have a chance to look at something in a new light is really important. Yep. And so Karen, do you want to say anything about your suggestion?
Yeah, just like we mentioned before, like testing out a project ahead of time. Just thinking about, I work at a public library, so when we have these events, we have patrons who come or are at different levels of making. Some like more simplified versions of a project, others like to dive in and be more complex. So when you're testing out a project, try to see like, oh, what's a good beginner level or how you can level it up. There's like different ranges of the project.
Cool. Yeah, and I think also especially like there's lots of resources out there around like tinkering for toddlers, and tinkering for early childhood. And so, maybe you're experimenting with similar phenomena, but working with materials that are just easier to manipulate for smaller hands. And I also think that it's also nice to think about how these levels complement each other. So, I know at the Exploratorium, we thought a lot about kind of like concentric circles. So maybe there was like an outer ring of like kind of fast exhibit-like experiences that people could just kind of sit down and do for a few minutes. Then maybe there was a kind of second level of things that people might spend, a little bit longer, a little bit more loose parts. And then in the middle is maybe a more facilitated workshop that takes a longer time. And not that like it was necessarily a progression, but maybe, some people went straight to the facilitated workshop. And then when they came out and saw these more simplified interactions, they saw them completely different, right? Or some people really wanted to just watch what was going on inside of the workshop for a long time before feeling comfortable enough that like, oh yeah, this is maybe something I could do, or that I would be accepted in this space. And so giving them this kind of like outer rim kind of allowed them to observe in kind of a low stakes way. And so I think just giving people different entry points could be really interesting. Other thoughts in the Judy, can I put you on the spot as a school librarian? Just like, do you have any suggestions or things that are kind of top of mind for you?
Well, I think the suggestion that was percolating in my head was that it's messy and you don't have to be like to let go of control and to just I mean, in the true essence of what tinkering is, like it's not a set of directions. I mean, you're setting the stage with materials, you're giving some ideas, but then like let the playful tinkering just be.
Yeah, and I think I really like how you say this, because I think it's like, I would not suggest like, okay, just like throw out parts and say, okay, y'all tinker, like it's completely free. Like there is a lot of facilitation that you're doing, either by curating examples, curating materials, giving ideas and suggestions, but then you really do, it's really helpful, I guess I would say, to let go of one specific outcome at the end, right? It's more about like, there's going to be an outcome for this person and a different outcome for the other and another. And really what you're doing is kind of helping people down each path that each might lead to a different point. And so I think kind of changing that framework is, in small, subtle ways, I think can be really interesting to experiment with. Cool. Well, I want to be respectful of time because we're at the hour, but I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you all so much for joining. Thanks to all of you who are watching. I'm putting my email in the chat, and also I'll put that on the resources on the Library Maker page. I'm also now a member of the Library Maker group, and I'm doing workshops both at the public library here in Freiburg and also with kind of a private English language library here. So I'm excited to continue the conversation with all of you about tinkering, and especially about tinkering in libraries.
Ryan, quick question.
Yeah.
Well, do you do like school visits, like virtual school visits at all?
I could have conversation. I'm interested to have conversations about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool for you to like interact with students and just get them
Yeah.
really, yeah, thinking about all this tinkering.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
I've
doing
yeah,
this.
I've done it before, and yeah, it's fun, and I agree. Like, coming in and seeing how you can do a spark, and then maybe the school keeps going over the next
Right.
weeks. That's really fun. So, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of Library Makers, I really, really want to thank you for doing this. It's been so great. We have a little survey in the chat. It's very quick, and I want to plug our next event, which is a Makerspace toolkit for anyone who is starting a Makerspace. I think Shannon had mentioned that in her in one of the chats. So we have a panel of presenters who have used this toolkit and have used it in their work. So they'll be talking about their experiences using it. So please join it if you can. And of course, we'll have the recording of it available later in the week. And that's the same for this session as well. If you want to go back to it, we will be posting the recording of it probably next week or so. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I feel very inspired and very creative right now, and I'm hoping to take what I've learned from this session into my own makerspace. So thank you again, Ryan, and thank you for everybody for your input and meeting you all today. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Julie. Thanks,
Thank
Shannon.
you.
Good to see you, Ken.
Here's my
Oh,
little.
yay.
It's a pigeon trying to get to the
Yes.
bus.
Oh, yeah.
If you
I
know
know
that
him.
story.
Oh, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really, yeah, a fun session. Thank you, Ryan.
Cool. Thanks, Karen. Good to see you, Ken. Thanks for your input, and yeah, talk soon, huh?
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Bye, Julie. Bye, Shannon. Bye.